It took exactly one phone call. One furious, screaming phone call that everyone in the office suite could hear, even though the recipient had the phone on speaker. One phone call where the President of the United States revealed something he probably never intended to admit publicly. One phone call that would transform his most loyal congressional ally from a fierce defender into someone who would stand on national television and ask a question that shook the foundations of his administration. What did Donald Trump mean when he said, "My friends will get hurt"? The story begins in September 2025 in a congressional office building in Washington, D.C., where Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene sat across from a group of women whose lives had been shattered by Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking operation. These were survivors, women who had endured unimaginable trauma as minors, who had cooperated with federal investigators, who had named names and provided evidence, and trusted the system to deliver justice. And for years, they had been met with silence, with bureaucratic delays, with promises that never materialized into prosecutions. Greene, who had built her political career on combating what she called the elite pedophile networks, had been meeting regularly with Epstein survivors since taking office. But this particular meeting in September was different. The survivors weren't just sharing their stories, they were demanding action. They had names. 20 names, documented in FBI Form 302 files, of powerful men who had allegedly participated in Epstein's trafficking operation. A royal prince, 6 billionaires, a rock star, a Hollywood producer, a prominent banker. Men whose wealth and influence had apparently made them untouchable. Greene listened, growing increasingly angry. These weren't conspiracy theories, these were sworn statements to federal investigators. This was evidence that had been sitting in FBI files for years, while the men named in those files continued their lives without consequences, without investigation, without anyone asking them a single question about what they had done to these girls. "I'm going to name them," Greene told the survivors, according to people present at the meeting. "I'm going to call a press conference, and I'm going to read every single name from those FBI files. The American people deserve to know who these predators are, and if the FBI won't do anything about it, Congress will." The survivors left that meeting with something they hadn't felt in years: hope. For the first time, someone with real power, someone with access to the media, someone who couldn't be intimidated or bought off, was promising to expose the men who had hurt them. Greene scheduled a press conference for the following week. Her staff began preparing materials, pulling together the documentation they could legally access through congressional oversight channels. The plan was straightforward: present the evidence, name the names, and force the Trump administration to explain why no investigations had been conducted, despite victims providing detailed, credible allegations to federal law enforcement. But the press conference never happened. What happened instead was the phone call. According to a New York Times Magazine report that Greene herself confirmed on NBC's Meet the Press just days ago, President Trump called Greene's office shortly after word of the planned press conference reached the White House. Greene took the call in her office suite, surrounded by staff members who were working on other matters. Trump was not on speakerphone initially, but according to people present, what happened next was so loud, so explosive, that speaker mode became irrelevant. Everyone in the suite of rooms could hear him yelling at her as she listened to him, the Times reported, citing a staff member who was present. The president was furious, his voice carrying through the phone with such volume that staffers in adjacent rooms stopped what they were doing and exchanged uncomfortable glances. Greene listened, holding the phone slightly away from her ear. Those who witnessed it described her expression as one of confusion, mixed with growing realization that something was very wrong with what the president was saying. The exact contents of most of that phone call remain unknown, but what is known, what Greene herself confirmed on national television on January 4, 2026, is what Trump said that made her question everything she thought she knew about his commitment to fighting elite pedophilia. "My friends will get hurt." 3 words: "My friends will get hurt." Not, the evidence isn't there. Not, you're wrong about these allegations. Not, we need to follow proper legal procedures. Just, my friends will get hurt. An admission that among the 20 names in those FBI files, among the men that Epstein survivors had named as their abusers, were people Donald Trump considered friends. And Trump was calling to ensure those friends didn't get hurt, even if it meant the women they allegedly victimized never got justice. Greene, despite her reputation as a Trump loyalist who defended the president through every controversy, was shaken. I expressed my perplexity over his intransigence, Greene told The Times, using careful language that couldn't hide her shock. Here was the president who campaigned on draining the swamp, who had promised to go after elite pedophiles, who had positioned himself as the enemy of corrupt Washington insiders, and he was calling her to protect men accused of raping children because they were his friends.
The press conference was quietly canceled. Greene's staff gave vague explanations about scheduling conflicts and needing more time to review the evidence. The survivors who had left that September meeting with hope watched their chance for justice slip away once again. This time, not because of FBI incompetence or bureaucratic delay, but because the President of the United States had personally intervened to protect men he considered friends. But Greene couldn't let it go. The question haunted her. Who were Trump's friends in those FBI files? Which of the 20 names were people he socialized with, did business with, golfed with? Was it the royal prince? One of the 6 billionaires? The prominent banker? The Hollywood producer? And more fundamentally, how could someone who claimed to be fighting elite pedophilia justify protecting accused predators because they were friends? For months, Greene kept this internal. Her voting record remained aligned with Trump. Her public statements continued to defend the administration. But those close to her noticed a shift. She became more vocal about demanding full release of the Epstein files. She questioned why Attorney General Pam Bondi wasn't pursuing the cases that FBI documents showed had been ignored. She challenged FBI Director Kash Patel's testimony that no credible evidence existed when she knew victims had given sworn statements naming specific individuals. The tension came to a head on January 4, 2026, when Greene appeared on NBC's Meet the Press for what was supposed to be an interview about the Venezuela military operation. But host Kristen Welker had obtained the New York Times Magazine report about Trump's phone call, and she asked Greene directly about it. The question was simple but devastating. What do you think President Trump meant by, "My friends will get hurt, Congresswoman"? Greene's answer was remarkable for what it revealed about her own ongoing struggle with what she had learned. You know, I've been asking that question ever since, and I make no apologies for standing with women and victims of rape, because in this country there are far too many victims of rape. She didn't defend Trump. She didn't explain away his words. She didn't claim the report was fake news or taken out of context. She confirmed it happened and acknowledged she had been asking herself that same question for months. Which of Trump's friends were in those FBI files as accused child rapists? The interview clip went viral within hours. #MyFriendsWillGetHurt began trending on social media. Legal analysts and victims advocates seized on Trump's words as an admission that he was knowingly protecting alleged child predators. The White House initially tried to dismiss the story, with press secretary claiming Trump had been taken out of context and was referring to false allegations that could harm innocent people. But that explanation collapsed under scrutiny because Trump hadn't said innocent people will get hurt. He had said my friends, implying he knew who they were and was personally invested in protecting them. The broader context made Trump's intervention even damning. For months, the Trump administration had been blocking full release of Epstein files, despite repeated promises of transparency. Attorney General Pam Bondi had publicly committed to releasing everything, then walked back that promise, citing grand jury secrecy rules and court orders. FBI Director Kash Patel had testified before Congress that no credible evidence existed of powerful people being involved in Epstein's trafficking, despite FBI Form 302 files documenting exactly that. Congressman Thomas Massey had exposed in congressional testimony that 20 men were named in FBI victim statements, yet not a single investigation had been opened. And now, Greene's revelation about Trump's phone call provided the missing piece of the puzzle. The administration wasn't blocking releases because of legal restrictions or lack of evidence. They were blocking releases because Trump was personally protecting friends who were named in those files. It wasn't about procedure, it was about protecting the powerful at the expense of justice for victims. The political implications were staggering. Greene wasn't just any Republican. She was Trump's most loyal congressional ally, someone who had defended him through impeachments, investigations, and countless controversies. She had used her platform to promote his agenda and attack his enemies. And now she was publicly questioning whether he was protecting child predators because they were his friends. If Trump had lost Marjorie Taylor Greene on this issue, he had lost one of his most important defenders.
But the personal implications for Greene were perhaps even more significant. She had built her political brand on fighting elite pedophilia. She had spoken at length about trafficking networks, about powerful people who abused children with impunity, about the need to expose and prosecute these predators regardless of their wealth or influence. Her constituents had supported her based on these positions, and now she was faced with the reality that the president she had championed was actively protecting men accused of exactly the crimes she claimed to want to fight. "I make no apologies for standing with women and victims of rape," Greene said in that Meet the Press interview, and the statement carried weight precisely because it implicitly acknowledged she couldn't stand with both the victims and Trump on this issue. She had to choose, and in that moment on national television, she chose the victims, even though it meant breaking with the president who had been the foundation of her political career. The survivor community's reaction was immediate and powerful. Sarah Ransom, one of Epstein's victims who had cooperated with federal investigators, tweeted, "Thank you at MT Greene for standing up for us. Trump's 'my friends will get hurt' admission tells us everything we need to know about why justice has been denied for so long. His friends matter more than children." Virginia Roberts Giuffre's family, still grieving her death months earlier, issued a statement thanking Greene for her courage in confronting the president and demanding answers about which of his friends were in the FBI files. Legal experts noted that Trump's statement could potentially constitute obstruction of justice. If the president called a member of Congress to prevent her from disclosing information about alleged crimes because it would implicate his friends, that's potentially criminal, noted former federal prosecutor Renato Mariotti. At minimum, it's evidence of corrupt intent, using his office to protect personal friends from investigation. But perhaps most damaging were the questions Trump's admission raised about his own relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Trump had known Epstein for decades. They had been photographed together at parties. They had been neighbors in Palm Beach. Trump had famously said in 2002 that Epstein was a terrific guy who likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. When Epstein was first arrested in 2019, Trump had claimed they had a falling out years earlier and hadn't spoken. But if Trump was protecting friends named in FBI files as Epstein associates, did that mean he was still friends with men involved in Epstein's operation? And what did that say about his own relationship with the deceased trafficker? These questions took on new urgency in light of previous reporting about the Epstein files. Journalist Michael Wolff had claimed that Epstein showed him photos of Trump with young girls whose ages were uncertain, and that Epstein believed these photos gave him leverage over Trump. A birthday letter allegedly from Trump to Epstein had surfaced, though Trump claimed it was forged. Multiple women had alleged Trump had inappropriate contact with them when they were teenagers, though Trump denied all such allegations. None of this was proof of criminal conduct, but Trump's statement about protecting friends named in FBI files raised the obvious question: was Trump one of those friends? Was he protecting himself? The White House faced an impossible communications challenge. They couldn't deny Trump made the statement because Greene had confirmed it and multiple staffers had witnessed the call. They couldn't explain it away as concern for innocent people because Trump had specifically said, "my friends," not "innocent people." They couldn't dismiss it as old news because Greene had just publicly confirmed it days ago. Their only option was to attack Greene, suggesting she was becoming unreliable or being influenced by Democrats, but that strategy had obvious problems given her rock-solid conservative credentials and long history of Trump's support. Republican leadership found themselves in an awkward position. Many had spent months defending the administration's handling of Epstein files, arguing that claims of a cover-up were conspiracy theories promoted by Democrats. Now one of their own most outspoken members was essentially confirming there was a cover-up, that Trump had personally intervened to prevent exposure of names, and that he had done so to protect friends. Several Republican senators who had blocked Democratic requests for Epstein file subpoenas began quietly signaling they might reconsider their positions. The FBI and Department of Justice also faced renewed scrutiny. If Trump was protecting friends named in FBI files, and if FBI Director Patel had testified that no credible evidence exists despite those same files containing victim statements, was Patel lying to Congress to help Trump protect his friends? Was Attorney General Bondi's refusal to release files part of the same cover-up? The questions that seemed like partisan attacks when Democrats raised them now seemed like legitimate oversight concerns when a prominent Republican was confirming the underlying facts. Victims advocates saw the Greene revelation as a potential turning point. For years, they had been told the Epstein files couldn't be fully released for legal reasons, that investigations weren't happening because evidence didn't meet prosecutorial standards, that delays were due to bureaucratic processes. Now they had Trump's own words suggesting the real reason: he was protecting friends. This admission could potentially be used in court to challenge the administration's continued withholding of files, to demand independent investigations of the 20 names in FBI documents, to force testimony from Trump about which of his friends he was trying to protect.
But there was also deep cynicism among survivors and their advocates. They had seen too many moments that seemed like breakthroughs, only to end in disappointment. Yes, Greene had confirmed Trump's damning statement. Yes, the question of which friends he was protecting was now a major news story. Yes, there was renewed pressure for transparency. But would anything actually change? Would a single one of the 20 men named in FBI files face investigation? Would the files be released? Or would this be another headline that generated outrage for a few days before the news cycle moved on and justice remained as elusive as ever? Greene herself seemed uncertain about what her revelation would accomplish. In the days after her Meet the Press appearance, she continued to question what Trump meant, but didn't call for his impeachment or criminal investigation. She didn't demand he release the names of his friends or explain why he had intervened. She had broken with him on this issue, stood with the victims, and raised questions that needed answers. But she hadn't taken the next step of using her congressional power to force those answers, to subpoena Trump's communications about Epstein files, to demand testimony under oath about which friends he was protecting. The question hanging over everything was whether this would be a moment that led to accountability or just another example of powerful people protecting powerful people. Trump had admitted in his own words that he intervened to prevent exposure of names because his friends would get hurt. That admission should have sparked investigations, congressional hearings, demands for transparency. But in a political environment where even the most damning revelations often led to partisan debates rather than consequences, it remained unclear whether Trump's "my friends will get hurt" admission would result in anything more than a few days of uncomfortable questions. What was clear was that Marjorie Taylor Greene, against all expectations, had done something remarkable. She had been one of Trump's most loyal defenders, someone who could be counted on to support him through anything. But when faced with evidence that he was protecting alleged child predators because they were his friends, she had chosen the victims over the president. She had gone on national television and confirmed a story that damaged Trump, raising questions she knew he didn't want to answer.
She had made clear that her commitment to fighting elite pedophilia meant more to her than her political alliance with Trump. "I make no apologies for standing with women and victims of rape," Greene had said, and in that statement was an implicit challenge to everyone who claimed to care about Epstein's victims. Would they stand with the victims, even when it meant confronting a president who admitted protecting his friends? Would they demand answers about which friends Trump was protecting and why? Would they use their power to force transparency and accountability? Or would they look the other way because it was politically convenient, because Trump was their guy, because protecting the powerful had always been more important than justice for victims? Sometimes the most important revelations come not from investigative journalists or whistleblowers, but from people who were once true believers confronting facts they can no longer deny. Greene's confirmation of Trump's "my friends will get hurt" statement was significant not just because of what it revealed about Trump, but because of what it revealed about her own evolution from blind loyalty to uncomfortable questioning. She still hadn't turned fully against Trump. She still supported much of his agenda, but on this issue she had drawn a line. Protecting alleged child predators was not something she would defend, even if the president demanded it. The question now was whether anyone else would follow her example, whether other Republicans would demand Trump answer questions about his friends, whether the administration's cover-up of Epstein files would finally face serious consequences, whether the 20 names in FBI documents would finally face investigation. Trump had given them all the evidence they needed in 3 simple words: "My friends will get hurt." The only question that remained was whether anyone had the courage to ask which friends and what they had done to earn Trump's protection.